welcome back to my channel. I'm Rachel, the owner and creator here at the Eclectic Cottage in Spokane, Washington. Happy snowy Saturday, you guys. I don't know what the weather's like where you are, but it's currently snowing again out there, so we'll see what happens with that. For today's video, I have some thrift flips for you guys, and I worked this time to create a vignette using different colors from the blue, green, and blue-green family from DIY Paint. I think there are so many beautiful colors that really work well together, and I kind of wanted to highlight that. So that's what I did for today's video. So I hope you like my projects, and I hope you do enjoy the video. But before we get there, I just wanted to say really quickly that my order from Redesign with Prima, I'm restocking some items, will be here on Tuesday, at least it's scheduled to be. So if you're looking for any of the items I'm currently out of stock on, those should be back in stock on Tuesday or Wednesday at the latest. And I'm also waiting for my order from Sweet Pickins Milk Paint. I'm getting more of the Tickle Pink color in that is 35% off for this month. And I'm also getting in the brand new colors that Jamie Ray Vintage collaborated with Sasha on to create. So stay tuned for those. As soon as I get them in, I will definitely show them to you. Anyway, that's it for announcements for today. And without further ado, let's get to today's projects. My first project for today is this set of bookends I picked up not too long ago at the Goodwill, and they were in pretty darn good condition, but there were some wear spots where some white was showing through. So to give them a good solid base coat, I went ahead and gave them a spray coat of this Rustoleum 2X in Espresso to start. Once I had that done, I brought them inside to dry, and then I am going to be giving these guys the exact same treatment that I gave a metal candle holder just not too long ago. So this color is called Mint Chip, and I am just going in and randomly pouncing that mint chip all over, not trying to get perfect coverage on these, just trying to leave a little bit of that brown shining through the mint chip paint. Once my first coat was dry, I did go ahead and go over them with a second coat. Again, not trying to get perfect coverage, but just trying to make the paint a little bit more vibrant and true to its color. Now, as I've mentioned before, one of the great things about DIY paint is that it's clay-based and can be reactivated with water, which makes distressing them a real breeze. Now, these had been sitting overnight and had plenty of time to dry and kind of harden. So I started my distressing process by spritzing each of my bookends with some water to start that paint reactivation so that it was a little bit easier for me to take off. I'm still using a damp shop towel, and rather than just rubbing over the detail areas in these bookends, I am dabbing the paint off, trying to get a little bit bigger chunks in areas, I guess, and make these have more of an authentically aged appearance. Anyway, that's my goal, and so I'm just going over both of these bookends with that same technique. Once I was happy with how both of my bookends were looking, I set them aside to dry, and then it was time to seal my paint. For that, I chose DIY's Clear Wax, which is probably my favorite of all of DIY sealers. And I'm just using my soft bristle brush to work that wax into all of the nooks and crannies on this piece, just being very careful to make sure that I get all of the paint sealed. Then once I have a good coat of wax on my piece, I'm going back in with a dry shop towel and just removing as much of the excess wax as I possibly can. My main goal here is just to make sure there aren't any big goobers of wax anywhere. If I miss a couple of spots where there's just a thin layer of wax, it's okay. The wax will dry in about 24 hours to the touch, and in about 30 days, it'll be completely cured. And in all honesty, with something like this that's just for decor only, you really don't have to worry too much about the cure time. Now you might have noticed I did not paint the bottom of these because they had really nice felt pads on them that I didn't want to have to try and paint around. So instead, I just took one of these shop towels with a little bit of mineral spirits and cleaned up the bottoms really well. I absolutely love how these came out, and I hope you guys do too. For my second project, I grabbed these two cute little fat birds that I picked up just recently at the Goodwill, and I am starting by giving these again a coat of that Rustoleum 2X spray in Espresso. You can see there's snow on the ground and it is cold outside, so I had to quickly spray these and then take them inside to dry. So as you can imagine, my poor shop smelled like drying spray paint for the rest of the day. But once my paint was dry, I started to pounce on my colors that I had chosen for these guys. Now, as I mentioned in the beginning of the video, I am creating a vignette using several different colors from DIY that are all in the blue or green or blue-green family that I think work really well together. So for these two birds, I chose two different colors. The first one you saw me do was Farm Fresh by DIY, and this beautiful color is Apothecary by DIY. These are two of my personal favorites. And again, I am just pouncing that paint on so that I don't have any brush strokes. And of course, since I was going over such a dark color, I did need to go over these with two coats of the DIY paint. Now, in recent videos, the finish I've been using for a lot of my decor pieces is to finish the paint off with a contrasting wax color. For these, I decided to go a different direction and I'm going to be distressing them. Now, again, I know distressing is not for everyone, so if you did not want to distress your birds, you could totally skip this step. But I am just taking a damp shop towel here and going over the details in these little birds and just rubbing back some of that DIY paint to reveal the brown underneath. I felt like this look would blend a little bit better with my bookends since I am trying to create a one cohesive vignette. I did this same technique on both of my little birds and then I set them aside to dry again. Then it was on to sealing my paint, and as usual, I am choosing DIY's clear wax for that, and I am just going over these with a nice, light, even coat of that wax, applying it with my soft bristle brush, and then very gently wiping back the excess wax. Now, I did notice as I was wiping the excess clear wax away from my birds that a little bit of the white from the original finish was showing through where I'd rubbed too hard. And I decided to try to blend that in a little bit. I would go over these birds with just a light coat of DIY's white wax. So that's what I'm doing here, just putting on a little coat of DIY's white wax to try to make the the white shining through the brown paint a little less apparent. So again, I'm just brushing on a very light coat of that white wax and then very, very gently wiping the excess white wax back. Now, as you can see, the white wax is pretty subtle over the Apothecary paint, but definitely more apparent over the Farm Fresh because Farm Fresh is a darker color. But in the end, I really love the effect of the white wax over these birds, and it really did help blend some of that white that was shining through the brown in a little bit better. I love how they came together, and I hope you guys do too. Project 3 is this frame that I picked up recently at the Goodwill. And first step was taking out the guts. And I realized the piece of cardboard that was in there was way too small. So I had to destroy one of my boxes that I'd been saving so that I could rectify that situation. So I went ahead and cut off a piece of that box, traced the glass onto it, and then very carefully cut out the piece that I needed with a razor blade so that I had a good backing for my picture. Then I went ahead and cut out a piece of watercolor paper so that I would have something to attach my art to. Once I had my new insides of my frame all ready, I went ahead and set those aside and started painting my frame. And for this frame, I chose DIY's green called Fancy Farmgirl, which is one of my favorite greens. So you can see here, I have one of my small little artist brushes and I'm just going over this entire frame with a good coat of that paint, making sure to work it into all of the little details. Once that coat of paint was dry, I did go over it with a second coat just to make sure I had full coverage over this little silver frame. Now, I bet you can't guess what I'm going to be using to seal my paint. Oh, you did, huh? Yep, it is my clear wax again. Just going over this with a nice even coat of that clear wax first. And of course, wiping back the excess very gently with my dry shop towel. Now, one of the things that attracted me to this little frame in the first place was that beautiful little detail that runs around the outside edge. And I wanted to make that stand out a little bit more. So I went ahead and grabbed out my DIY dark wax. And I'm not going to be going over the entire frame with this. I am just going to go over that detail in particular, just with a little bitty artist brush, trying to work that in to all of that little detail along the edge. Then I just took my dry shop towel and very, very gently wiped along the edge to clean those up and then kind of dabbed the wax off of the details so that some of it was left in the deeper nooks and crannies of that detail. Once I'd finished with the detail portion of my frame, I took a little bit of that dark wax and just went right over the grooved portion of the frame, just adding a touch of shadow into that groove. I did take my dry shop towel and wiped back the excess and really just left a very, very light shadow in that groove. Once I was done with that, I grabbed out my Eternal Gold Decor wax by Redesign with Prima, and just using my fingertip, I applied a little bit of that beautiful gold wax onto the detail. This really made the detail stand out, and then you could really see the shadowing underneath. I just think this is such a lovely combo, and I really like gold and green together, you guys. So this for me was perfect. I did go around the outside edge and the inside edge as well with a little bit of that gold wax. And now that the outside portion of my frame is finished, I can move back to finishing up the inside. And to start, I grabbed this muslin fabric that I had, and I used the piece of glass from the frame to trace a square on it and then cut that out. This is going to be the backdrop for my transfer I'm going to be applying. So this is the reason that I had cut out the piece of watercolor paper so that I could use that as the backing for my fabric. So I went ahead and gave it a good coat of glue with my Gorilla spray glue and then applied my fabric directly to that watercolor paper. Now this transfer is from the Mystic Hydrangea transfer set. This one I do not have available on my website, but you could use any of the beautiful new transfers that Redesign with Prima just came out with to get this same kind of effect. As you can see, I'm applying the transfer directly to my fabric, and it applies just like it would over anything else. You just rub it down with that transfer stick, making sure that it applies completely and pulling back that piece of vellum as you go. Very simple, and I love the effect of these transfers over fabric. I just think it's beautiful. Now, of course, before I can put everything together, I needed to clean my glass. So I just grabbed my Windex and a shop towel and gave it a good cleaning. And then I put my frame back together again. You can see how the fancy Farmgirl really brings out the beautiful green in this transfer. And I absolutely love how this piece came together. My final project for today is this little recipe box that I have had in my stash for the longest time. I think this actually came from my garage, and it had a very dated paint job on it that I decided I wanted to go over, but I knew I was going to be using one of the Cottage colors, and they are self-leveling, and I was worried that some of these painted on designs might show through the paint. So I went ahead and took this out in the very, very cold weather and gave it a good sanding with some 80 grit sandpaper to just remove any raised paint that was there and to just smooth everything out. After a good rinse and some time to dry, it was time to paint my little recipe box. And I am sticking with the blue and blue-green theme for today. And the Cottage color I chose is called Haint Blue. It is a beautiful, soft blue that I just love. This is my first time ever actually using it, you guys. And I really think it's so, so pretty. Now, as I mentioned before, these paints are self-leveling, which means you get a very smooth finish with these, and you don't have to worry about brush strokes, which I love. The other great thing is that they have a built-in sealer, so you don't have to worry about wax or any sort of top coat with these. The Cottage colors also come in a beautiful range of colors, from pinks and blues to a really dark gray, green, red, purple, all sorts of beautiful colors. And if you're interested in checking them out, they are available on my website, and that's www.theeclecticcottagespokane.com. Now, admittedly, the Cottage colors are a little bit more thin than the regular DIY line, which means over a darker color, you might need an extra coat of paint. However, luckily for me, this little box had a very light coat of paint on it, so I only needed 2 coats of paint to finish. Once my paint was dry, it was time to apply my transfers. For this, I'm using another piece of that Mystic Hydrangea transfer set. I've had these sitting around for ages, you guys, and I just really wanted the chance to use them, and they were kind of the inspiration for my color scheme for today's video. So again, I just took this big piece of the Mystic Hydrangea set, applied it to the top of my little recipe box, and then I'm using that transfer stick to rub that transfer down onto my paint while I very carefully peel back that piece of vellum. Now these are older transfers, so I did have a little bit of lifting, but if you have that happen, just lay your vellum back down and re-rub that spot and the transfer should stick. Then it's time for burnishing, which means going over the transfer with a piece of that vellum to just remove any air bubbles and make sure you have really good adhesion. Once I had that big piece down, I decided to add a little bitty hydrangea to the back of my recipe box just to kind of tie it in. And again, just using that same technique to apply it. Once I had my transfers applied, I went ahead and grabbed out my little stamp set and I began to apply the word seeds to the front of my box. So I started by setting my words out onto the front of my box and then picking them up with this piece of backer board very carefully. And then I just inked them up. I'm using Stazon ink. And then I very carefully laid that backer board back down using it as a guide, and then laid my stamps down and then gently pressed them into my box. Now, of course, I don't have 2 E's or 2 S's, so I had to re-stamp the E. And then I decided that the other E was pretty light, so I went ahead and went over it again just to make it a little darker. And then I added that final S. Now I still had a couple small flowers left from the Mystic Hydrangea set, so I just went ahead and added those to the front of this box to give it a little more detail. Lastly, to protect my transfers from wear and just ensure their longevity on this piece, I'm going to go over them with a quick coat of DIY's clear liquid patina. The reason I'm using liquid patina here rather than Big Top is liquid patina has a little less sheen to it, and I think it more closely matches the sheen of the Cottage color. So again, I'm just going over the areas with the transfers with a coat of that liquid patina, and then my little seeds box will be finished. I absolutely love how this came out, and I hope you guys do too. For today, you guys. What did you think of my vignette that I created using all sorts of different blues, greens, and blue-greens together? I hope you liked them and I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please remember to give it a thumbs up. I so appreciate that. And if you haven't already, I would really love it if you would subscribe to my channel, and then of course just hit the little notification bell so you don't miss anything. And then don't forget to drop a comment below and let me know what you thought of today's projects and if you had a favorite. Let's see, just a quick reminder, here. Of course, as I talked about in the beginning of the video, I do carry a full line of DIY products here in the shop, and they're available on my website, and that's www.theeclecticcottagespokane.com. I carry DIY paint and products, as well as Sweet Pickins milk paint and products, Redesign with Prima, and some Recycled Treasures decoupage papers, so you can check those out there. For Wednesday's video, I have a feeling it's going to be a thrift haul. The back of my Acura is still stacked with the stuff we picked up last Sunday, and then we are going to be going on another junk run tomorrow, so hopefully we'll find a few more things to add to the mix. So I hope you'll join me back here on Wednesday for that. Until then, I hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your weekend. Happy Super Bowl weekend. And I will see you back here on Wednesday. Thank you so much for being here, you guys. Bye.